Our next story tonight is about a race to keep millions of people alive. These people are the poorest of the poor. They live in India, where amidst the squalor, there is now a full-blown epidemic of HIV. To treat many of the infected, there are low-cost generic drugs made in India. The generics have helped millions of HIV patients who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford them. But giant pharmaceutical companies and the U.S. government have stepped in to change India, to help modernize it. And along the way, one of the casualties may be those low-cost generic drugs. This does not sit well with the man who almost single-handedly slashed the cost of AIDS-fighting drugs in India. He says millions of lives are now hanging in the balance.
What is the point of developing new and life-saving drugs if they're not accessible to the common man worldwide at affordable and reasonable prices?
We caught up with Dr. Yusuf Hamied in London. He is an Indian-born, Cambridge-educated chemist and pharmaceutical executive who makes copies of many of the world's top medicines and sells them for pennies on the dollar. And while he is indeed a wealthy man, many poor people owe him their health. In 2001, he shocked the medical establishment when his company, CIPLA, introduced life-saving AIDS drugs at a price nobody believed was possible.
The price of the drugs, combination drugs, which were given at that time individually for HIV, came to about $10,000 to $15,000 per patient per year.
That was in the late 1990s, when the cost was too high for almost any patient living in the third world to afford. But Dr. Hamied sliced the price by about 97%.
In February 2001, we reduced the price to below $1 a day. Suddenly the world woke up, and the New York Times ran it on the front page that CIPLA offers a cocktail at $1 a day.
And what happened in the wake of that?
From that period, where there were 10,000 people only on antiretrovirals worldwide, today there are 1.5 million using antiretrovirals, of which 1/3 are on CIPLA's antiretrovirals.
But if you haven't heard the name CIPLA, you aren't alone. CIPLA's headquarters is a world away from the pharma giants of the Western world. Located here, in India's business capital, Mumbai, also known as Bombay. CIPLA recently became the top-selling pharmaceutical company in India. But nothing has done more to boost CIPLA's profile than Dr. Hamied's drive to lower the cost of antiretrovirals, making treatment accessible to poor people throughout the developing world.
The price today, sir, is not $300 per patient per year. This is for an adult. It is $100 per patient per year.
Now, how did you do that? You started with an effective HIV/AIDS treatment that was $10,000 to $12,000 annually.
Were we sold by the big pharma companies. So you can see what obscene profits the big pharma companies made with their monopoly.
When Dr. Hamied's father founded CIPLA back in 1935, his goal was to provide an Indian solution to India's health problems. Today, CIPLA exports to 170 countries, including the U.S., helping India to become what many call the pharmacy for the world's poor. The Indian generic drug industry was launched in 1972 when the Indian Parliament overhauled its patent law, allowing its companies to copy other people's products as long as the engineering process was slightly different. With their patents no longer respected in India, most international pharmaceutical companies withdrew from the country.
So that gave us, post-1972, the legal right to manufacture essentially any drug that India required. And I think at that point in time, the big pharma companies missed the boat. They thought, you Indians, what can you do? In fact, that was told to me, to my face. Let's see what you Indians can do.
And this is what the Indians did. Free from patent restrictions, thousands of drug companies sprang up in India in the last 4 decades, all producing cheap copies of name-brand drugs. CIPLA, in particular, has flourished and takes pride in the safety of their drugs.
We run 30 factories in India. Most of our factories have been regularly inspected and audited by the world's leading regulatory authorities. In this particular factory where you're standing, we've had 9 inspections in the last 2 years from the US FDA.
From Uganda to Uruguay, CIPLA exports a range of cheap drugs that treat everything from Alzheimer's to asthma to arthritis. The low cost of Indian generics, especially antiretrovirals, also called ARVs, has brought new life to people like Sunita, helping to transform HIV from a death sentence into a chronic disease.
माझं जीवन तर संपलंच असतं जर MSF नसतं भेटलं तर कारण का माहिती का MSF मध्ये एवढी जे पूर्ण जेवढे आहेत खूप प्रेम दिलं त्यांनी.
Sunita, like all of the HIV patients in this story, isn't using her real name because of the stigma of AIDS in India. Sunita is one of at least 2.5 million Indians with HIV. She waited for years to get treatment because she was scared to skip work. Sunita finally started taking generic ARVs in 2005.
मला एकदम असं वाटलं की मी मरणार आता म्हणजे असं वाटलं मला 2005 ला असं मला वाटलं मी संपणार म्हणजे मी मरणार असं वाटलं मला आणि माझ्या घरातल्या माणसांनी पण मला साथ नाही दिली. मी बोलली माझ्या बरोबर चला म्हणजे मला एकदम जुलाब आणि उलट्या पण झाल्या आणि एकदम मी कमजोर झाली.
Sunita got the virus from her husband who died of AIDS in 1998. He never took ARVs because at the time they were too costly to even consider. Instead, his doctor gave him vitamins.
मी माझ्या मिस्टरांसाठी केलेले हे ठेवलेले कानातले ठेवलेले हां हां म्हणजे ब्लड चढवायचं होतं जे एकदम लास्ट स्टेपवर गेले तर डॉक्टर गिरडा बोलला का खून चढ़ाना पड़ेगा उनको.
But thanks to generic ARVs, millions of people around the world like Sunita have been able to survive many years with HIV. But now, the global supply of these inexpensive drugs could be threatened. India is in the process of trying to chart a path to parity with the West. But in a land of such chaos and contrast, with 800 million Indians living on less than $2 a day, India must navigate new territory.